So let's make some sense of where we are right now with Economist Professor Miriam Altman and Dr. Iraj Abedian. To the pair of you, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you've had your TV sets on this morning watching what the DA and then the ANC has been saying, but the DA, for its part, we heard from Dr. Mark Burke basically saying that they've proposed or they've had two attempts to propose an alternative to taxes, and they've got their own views, and it seems as if there's a great deal of polarity between where they stand right now and where the ANC is standing. We heard from Tequila Mbalula a little bit earlier on, talking about things like using the budget to undermine the transformation agenda, and the expansion of the zero-rated VAT basket shows fiscal responsibility. As listeners, as viewers, we've been presented a number of different options, and I'd like to understand how you make sense of where we are on the eve of that vote. And Professor Altman, I'd like to give you the first response, please. Welcome to the both of you, by the way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to get shot for this, but I think this is a bit of a sideshow. And, raising VAT by 0.5%, it's not the end of the world. The DA is kind of using this as a political football around expropriation. The NHI, they're asking for removal of tariffs, reduction of BEE, and those can all be things in their agenda. But the most important thing they're asking for is let's find some efficiency in the budget. Let's find ways of reducing recurrent expenditure by 50 to 100 billion. Now, that's a good project to do. That's the one thing, if we care about the country, that's what we need to find. And the increase in expenditure and a budget process that runs the way it's supposed to. In other words, you don't increase the budget, frankly, 3.5% to 4.5% higher than what it would have been in their policy statement in October. That's just, that may sound like a small number, but it's an enormous number. This is the biggest resource allocation that happens annually in the country. And a 3 to 4.5% increase in that over the course of a few months means you've got to get the budget process under control. It's a key goal. That's what they should be arguing for. Let me start there.
All right. And I want to come back on a few things that you've said, but let's hear from Iraj for his first take.
I think I want to just elevate the debate a little bit higher from a fiscal point of view, not from a political point of view.
Yeah.
They are playing political football with the life of the country. And the reality is that, and I hope I'm not dramatizing by using the cliche of rearranging chairs on the sinking Titanic. Both ANC and DA, in my humble view, they are off the mark. They're really off the rail from a fiscal planning point of view, because since 2012, this budgetary system has gotten gradually but rapidly out of control. Miriam referred to it. It's a bit technical, but it's absolutely essential that you cannot run a budget, a fiscal framework, on a sort of ad hoc annual basis, especially for a country that's got, as we all know, it's got huge legacy issues that are not short-term able to lend themselves to solutions. So you need to have medium to long-term, consistent and committed and intentional framework, which means you don't keep borrowing, and then come 2012, increase the VAT because rating agencies are flagging red flags and all that stuff. This is nonsense management of fiscal policy. And I'm sorry to use a strong term, but this is a reality that both ANC and DA need to get off their high horses, not play politics with the life of people, and get the fiscal framework in such a way, importantly, in such a way that it can revive growth. Short of that, both of them are rearranging chairs on the sinking Titanic.
All right. I wanted to ask what should be happening today. I'll defer the question to later. And before I get to your opening comments, Miriam, let me circle back on what Iraj has just said on the fiscal framework. It can't be an ad hoc fiscal framework. In other words, there has to be a longer view, which is carried through, through the various finance ministers and through Treasury and all of the other players that are responsible for tooling out a budget. Who creates that? How do we get that? Do you even agree?
So 100%. That's why I was saying I think this is a sideshow debate. It's not even an interesting debate. Raise VAT by 0.5% if you need to raise money directly. It's not a small decision, but it's not an enormous one. The big issues are the institutional ones, and that means strengthening revenue collection, strengthening municipal management, which Treasury is driving at the moment, SOE stabilization, that's a key fiscal risk, and these are monopolies on service delivery, so critical to growth, and getting public sector remuneration and negotiations, getting a grip on it. Governments they started to get it organized at the end of the 1990s when Treasury and the Department of Public Service Administration were working together to get a long-term view. And then all bets have been off since then. So it's run like a spaza shop. And so the biggest increases, and it's the biggest expenditure in the country, and very important, whatever people say about a bloated public service, it's not the way to think about it. These are doctors, teachers, nurses, at the front line, and that's what Treasury wants to finance now. When it cut back last year, it said to the provinces, do whatever you want to do, but you've got to cut back. So you know what happened? Because nobody took a decision on it, they didn't fill teachers' posts. So the teacher-pupil ratios have fallen. So actually, pupil-teacher ratios have risen. So the classroom sizes have gotten bigger. The health worker positions haven't been filled. So now they have a situation where they've got to increase the budget for frontline personnel, which is actually the biggest increase in this whole amount. Now that's just fly-by-night budgeting planning. And as Iraj is saying, these things are so critical to the lives of everyone, to the growth trajectory, and require structured decisions. It's mostly institutional decisions that need to be made to build capacity and then align revenue and expenditure along with that.
Can I just stay with you for a second more, Miriam, on the VAT, right? And what you said at the beginning of our interview now is that VAT is not the end of the world. It's not a small thing, but it's not an enormous thing. Why do you think then it has pivoted, or, the decisions around this, the way that it's been presented to the public, and there has been reaction from those who care about the poor and how much it's going to impact them. And there have been debates around what's actually been further zero rated in order to mitigate this proposal on the table. But why do you think it's become, almost a poster for what's dysfunctional in this budget?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Miriam. Sorry, just to follow up on what you said at the opening. Yeah.
So firstly, let's get some, just to be careful, because both Iraj and I talk a lot.
That's okay. I got you.
You invited us. So I'm trying to be disciplined. So firstly, just so you understand, the amount of VAT that gets collected, it would be about 75% paid for by, middle income and upwards people in the economy, just to position that. What happens in this country is we get sidetracked, and this is why I said we get sidetracked by stuff. So instead of saying we should be ensuring that teachers' posts are filled and health workers' posts are filled, and that is unacceptable. That should have happened last year. That negotiations around public sector personnel, right skill, right job, performance requirements, that less bureaucracy, more frontline workers, things like that would be critical. The quality of municipal service delivery and getting better bang for buck around public sector infrastructure spending. Those are real things that would make an enormous difference to people's lives and to the economy. Instead, we're going crazy about a 0.5% increase in VAT. That's just not the central debate. So it becomes a political football, as did, like the focus on expropriation. We should be talking about land and asset ownership, the ability of people to own housing, the distribution of land to Black farmers and their ability to own it. Like, talk about real stuff, but we end up getting sidetracked into stuff that, deals with emotion, but is really going to move the dial.
All right. So what do we do then, Iraj? Because I mean, I think it's really important because as you know, as people, as citizens, we're made to look over here, and that debate is being set by the key political players in the land. You're saying get off your high horse. You're saying deal with the real issues. I mean, what should we be hearing from these committees now in Parliament that are trying to get to grips with what's on the table and deciding how things will be voted on tomorrow?
I think what we need to do, Iman, is that, first of all, I'm happy that for the first time ever since our democratic order, the parliament is getting involved and the citizen can hear that there are big critical choices to be made. And instead of panicking and thinking that something has gone off the rail, no, things have come back on the rail as it should be. Budget should not be a rubber stamping by the parliament. Then parliamentarians must resign, all of them en masse. So the issue is, first of all, it's the right thing to do for you and I and for every citizen to understand that there are key decisions to be made. Today, and hopefully the parliament in the next couple of days and the weeks, will begin to ask the bigger, most critical issue. How are we going to get the revenue increasing? How are we going to investment rising and tax base expanding? Short of which, every year, this problem will become bigger and bigger and bigger and not smaller. So VAT increase is not the answer. Tax increase is a sideshow because there isn't really much revenue to be gained from it. The real issue is for 15 years, the growth base of this economy has been looted out. And as a result, tax revenue base or tax base of the economy or the government has deteriorated badly and has reached a cul-de-sac at the moment. By a short-term plaster on the wound, you're not going to sort the problem out. Whether the VAT is 2%, 0.5% is not the real issue from a fiscal framework and macroeconomic policy making. That's what the parliament needs to put the entire cabinet on notice. Go back to the drawing board, come out with a medium to long-term solution for this critical and really essential national issue.
I want to come back to both of you. Stay with me for a heartbeat. We'll take a short break and back with Professor Miriam Altman and Dr. Iraj Abedian. Let's continue talking about this budget now with Professor Miriam Altman and Dr. Iraj Abedian. Miriam, Iraj talked about these unsustainable debt levels that we're at. We can't continue borrowing. Again, it was another central talking point at both attempts and the final, delivery of that budget recently. I mean, our debt servicing costs are really, really high. I think we'll call it at around 390 billion in this financial year. I think it will increase to about 425 billion in the next 22 cents of every rand. I mean, the numbers are there and a lot of South Africans know them. It seems inevitable in our context. Again, if we're thinking about new ideas, that we're focusing on the wrong things, we're arguing about the wrong things, how do we deal with this big elephant?
So, the issue is not that debt is too high, although right now we spend about 18% of total expenditure on interest payments. So, you want to get that down. But if you're borrowing to stimulate growth, which means that you're spending it in ways that are highly productive. So if you invest in infrastructure, it's highly productive. That the reform process of the SOEs and the entry of the private sector, for argument's sake, the running of your ports and logistics, if that's what you're investing in and it's growth promoting, it can be a very good thing. And if you have a grip on the debt trajectory, then our debt to GDP ratio is not outrageous. The challenge is that we don't have a grip on it. So every single year, since 2017, when Michael Sachs was in the budget office before he left, he rose an alarm bell. And I've been tracking the debt to GDP ratio. I call it a tsunami because it looks like a tsunami. And every single year it gets revised. So we just don't have a grip on it. If you've got a grip on it and you can show it's going to get worse before it gets better, as any even successful company might do, and it's going to come down in the following way once we start getting on a growth trajectory, and then it does, that's okay. So the point is not the borrowing, it's the trajectory. And I'll just reiterate what those key issues are. It's having a budget process that you've got a grip on. It's strengthening revenue collection, which is happening. It's sorting out municipal management. Treasury does have a process, which I'm happy to speak about. I'm very engaged in it, in reforming, especially the metropolitan areas, which is where most people live. It's stabilizing the main state-owned enterprises like Eskom, Transnet, PRASA, and making sure that they're not a fiscal drag, a fiscal weight, and that they're actually delivering effectively. And it's the public sector remuneration strategy, a long-term strategy in relation to public sector personnel. Those are the key things that create risk for the fiscal framework and which have an enormous impact on the efficiency of the economy that then stimulates growth and enables poverty reduction.
I mean, that's interesting, and it sounds practical as well. I mean, Iraj, your thoughts on debt?
Yeah, I think debt is like human blood pressure. Don't get it under control, you'll have sudden death. So in macroeconomic terms. So I think that this debt is reached, in my view, beyond the sustainable level. We need to get it under control. That we know, but how is the issue? And I think Miriam touched some of them, but what is not on the radar of the government is you cannot get debt under control unless you get growth going from the current anemic 0.5% to 4 to 4.5%. Now, that's a humongous challenge for our country, all considered, especially that we don't have a capable public sector. We talk diplomatically about municipalities and so on. 90% of government departments, health, education, policing, water, etc., they are dysfunctional. They are squandering resources. They have squandered billions upon billions in the name of dams, in the name of power station, in the name of every good-sounding developmental state kind of objectives, all of which have become a platform for plunder and pillage. Now, that has to be stopped. Iman, let me refer you to these are not emotional statements I'm making. The budget speech has got the shortest paragraph in budget speech for me, as an economist interested in fiscal policy, is the most critical. The Minister of Finance says, and I'm quoting from my memory, that over the past 11 years, the government has commissioned 246 expenditure management consolidation projects, meaning somebody has been paid handsomely for each of those to say, how do we achieve what Miriam just talked about? Expenditure consolidation, reallocation, etc. So 246 of them. Just imagine if each one of them was 10 million, 20 million, and I'm sure each of them would be more than that. But hundreds of millions the National Treasury has spent on how to do it, and here is the punchline, Iman. The Minister of Finance says none of them has been looked at by the cabinet. Can you believe it? You believe this is how expenditure is managed? Miriam talked about the sponsorship. I believe sponsorships manage projects, finances, expenses much better than commissioning 246 and doing nothing about it for 11 years. That is outrageous.
Yeah.
You cannot manage the economy like this. So unless growth is put on track, no amount of VAT increases, et cetera, is going to deal with the medium-term challenge that we have. So both governments, the cabinet, in my view, needs to go back to the drawing board, come back with a budget within the framework of a turnaround of growth to the point of reaching 4.5%, not as the president in his State of the Nation said. Remember, his medium-term development plan is to increase growth to 2%. How pathetic. It's less than the population growth, which means the president is telling us in 3 years' time, we have to still believe and expect more impoverishment per capita. That is not the way to sort out the revenue base. The debt will get out of control even more.
Yeah, and we haven't breached, 2% growth over the last decade or so. And I think a lot of what you're saying is past behavior and choices is a very good indicator of what will happen in the future if we continue to do the same things. It's the definition of insanity, essentially. Miriam, well then, where does that leave us? Because, the politics has hijacked the chat. I mean, we can see all morning long, we've been listening to what the DA or the ANC is saying, who's going to garner what support, what will happen when this budget budget gets voted through. But what you are both saying is, let's look at that fiscal framework. Let's look at real issues and opportunities where this needs to change. Well, you know, where are we right now anyway? I mean, given everything that we know up until this point and the kind of debate that's currently ongoing between those finance committees in Parliament.
Well, given what I've said, you may be surprised by what I'm going to say next. There's actually a lot of awesome work going on behind the scenes. And the smoke and mirrors of the political debate around 0.5% of VAT and whatever, you know, frankly, it's just a sideshow. It would be lovely if politicians could drive a public agenda and debate that is actually about the real stuff that actually is happening. So if you want to know, there is huge intervention to get these SOEs functioning and to affect reform that allow private-public partnership. I'm working on water security right now in Gauteng and Itaquini, and there are major initiatives that I'm working with in relation to Treasury's drive to reform and get better performance in the 8 metros, which is where like over 70% of the population live, and a huge drive to turn around the services around electricity, water, sanitation, and waste management in the metros as well. And that has had a huge impact. I'm working with 4 metros of the 8, and I can already see over the past year the change in behavior and how they've responded. Part of the increase here is an allocation to that process of the metro turnarounds, which allow for financial incentives that encourage the metros to improve performance in the delivery, stuff like quality of customer service, revenue collection for water, et cetera. So what I'm raising is there's actually a lot of really important initiatives going on to address the kinds of things that I was referring to. These are the things that should be discussed, that the DA, this should be music to the DA's ears. It's just not maybe on their political agenda, but these are the things that people should be focusing on. And then the quality of education, you know, all of these areas are quality of healthcare, maybe not NHI, you know, quality of 24/7 available clinics in, you know, for the entire population would be an amazing goal and a life changer. These are the things we should be talking about. But in the meantime, I just want to say that there actually are some really incredible and important initiatives that will be game changers. Those are the things that should be elevated in these debates.
Iraj,
and not the sunshine stuff.
Yeah. Iraj, your thoughts on that? I mean, Miriam's talking about reform in the municipalities, and we know that that's a golden opportunity to make sure that the PFMA is upheld, that money is accounted for, that projects actually get completed properly. I mean, as a channel, we do stories every single day on sewage, raw sewage running through communities, not 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, but beyond, since 1994, where money has been allocated, but nothing has been delivered. When you look across the landscape of South Africa, and you have shared some ideas already around where some of our turnaround opportunities are. We don't have the luxury of time to ruminate too long as a country, because we are, as some economists have said, heading for the precipice. What do you see when you look at South Africa as bright spots that we need more of?
I think these type of projects that Miriam talks about, these are important, without a doubt. They are affecting the lived reality of citizens. But these are not going to change the growth of the economy from 0.5% to 4.5%, 5%. These are important, necessary, but not sufficient. So let's not diminish the importance of that, but at the same time, let's not hang our hope that if we get the municipalities running as they should be, and this is in itself is a sad state of affairs, that we've normalized the abnormal to the point that now we get excited about municipalities, metropoles running there as they should have done, or they should be. That is absolutely the statement of tragedy. So we need to really focus the cabinet, and I'll come back to the cabinet, because unless the cabinet gets its mind right and its political commitment and ethics right to say that South Africa needs to be growing a minimum of 4.5%, what needs to be done, no matter what the cost. And I emphasize, these are not easy solutions. For example, Miriam talked about getting a grip on the expenditure. That means cutting the wages from the president all the way down, cutting the blue lights, cutting public servants, redundant people, etc., etc. All of that, and SOEs, all of those are tough decisions. But unless those tough decisions are made and unless rapid mindset or step changes is implemented from the top of the government with commitment, not for 6 months or 2 years, for 15 to 20 years, we are not going to solve the growth issues. We are not going to revive growth trajectory and get a fiscal framework that is able to sustain the type of support that this economy and the society needs.
Maybe final thoughts from the both of you. I mean, the one thing I keep thinking about is how citizens should reorient their ask from their politicians. For example, this morning, the chat has been political. And as you said earlier, we need to really remove the political chat and focus on the fiscal policy chat. How do we smarten up and sharpen what we ask for from our politicians? Miriam, you used the word tsunami a little bit earlier on. We know that we are in a crisis situation right now. Some of the things that we need to do can't be done overnight. Where else do you think we need to be taking urgent action? Because some of what you've been suggesting in terms of the municipal reform is more of a slow burn. It's going to take some time. Again, where do you see these opportunities for emergency intervention that can yield short-term change?
So firstly, we shouldn't see this as an emergency. This is more like a frog in boiling water, okay? So we're always in a crisis. The issue is the ideas, the points that I was making are game changers. In an environment where you're stagnant or shrinking, which is what we're doing, when you're growing by 1% in this economy or 1.5%, you're shrinking because population growth might be about 1.5%. So, and the core challenge that we have is that we were building up institutions to serve the entire country in the 1990s and in the 2000s, and that project got reversed. So the institutions are crumbling, and the capacity in these institutions to deliver on basic routines has crumbled. And bureaucracies are fundamentally about routines. They're not creative organizations. They require that everybody kind of knows more or less what they're supposed to do. So where I would depart from what Iraj was saying is that in my experience, and I have led turnarounds of damaged organizations, is these things that sound like, oh, well, they should know how to do it. Well, they don't. So municipalities improving accountability, getting expenditure under control, driving performance, improving service delivery metrics, measured metrics, earmarking, say, water revenue to water investment in water distribution networks will be game changers. Okay. Any major change to an institutional delivery mechanism that currently operates like a monopoly, as does Eskom, Transnet, PRASA, the municipal service delivery around electricity and so on, any improvement in that will be a growth inducer.
Thanks, Miriam, for that. And a lot of food for thought for us about what to watch for opportunities where South Africa can bring some of that radical change, growth and benefit to the economy. Iraj, a last quick final word from you. I may have omitted to ask something that you think is really important. Now's your chance.
I think unless we get the level of national investments from the current pathetic 10% or 12%, to 25 to 30%, no amount of incremental marginal improvement is going to move the needle. It will be important, but it's not going to move the needle. To move the needle, we need to have a national, and this is where I disagree with Miriam, we need to declare a national emergency for an attack on wasteful expenditure and improving investment in an intentional and planned and systematic way so that our ports, our rails, our water resources, our infrastructure, including urban management and so on, improves. That requires investment, not 1 year, over 20 to 25 years, doubling the current level. That will not happen through this type of mediocre discussions that's happening at the current level of budgetary debates, nor will it happen by marginal improvements. Important as those marginal improvements are, unless the level of national investment goes double to 2.5 times what it is now, we are not going to get out of this hole that we have dug for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, compelling, if not differing arguments there, but a lot of food for thought. And thank you very much for serving it on our table this morning. Professor Miriam Altman and Dr. Iraj Abedian talking about this budget. And we'll have more analysis on it throughout the course of the day. One of the things they mentioned there was around infrastructure, and the Council for the Built Environment today is hosting its inaugural Public Works and Infrastructure Summit here in Johannesburg. It's under the theme, Turning South Africa into a Construction Site, Growing the Economy and Creating Jobs. Michael Sutcliffe of City Insight says the gathering will be an opportunity for the sector to discuss ways to spur economic growth.
It's very important that the ministers called it, and with the help from the Council for the Built Environment, which is the body bringing together professionals, a conference like this, because the first time it's been held in this format, and the idea is to have it as an annual event. This year, create the benchmarks. What do we need to do? Next year, come back and say, have we done that? What we need to do as a country, clearly we're not spending enough